I use the dating analogy. It's like, how do you connect and how do you realize you have something that I need? What's the connection? What's the common point of interest between the two of us? And I think that can happen live or physical and virtual.
Hello and welcome to the Healthtech Marketing Podcast. This is brought to you by HIMSS and HIMSS. So thank you for joining us today. I'm Adam Chirinas. I'm the CEO and founder of Health Launchpad. So why are we doing this thing? Well, marketing to healthcare is really hard. And you know what? We could all use a little bit of help. So this Healthtech Marketing Podcast is a chance for you to hear directly from superstar health tech marketers, people like the awesome Robyn Duda, who I'll introduce in a minute, who are going to share insights about what works in marketing, and especially what works in marketing to healthcare organizations. So the aim of this show is to give you some practical advice, and you hope that what you'll do is take away some tips, some ideas, some new insights, things that you can act on immediately. The pod's brought to you by HIMSS, global advisor, thought leader, and leading member organization that's transforming how the healthcare ecosystem works. And my firm, Health Launchpad, which is a marketing consultancy which specializes in helping healthcare technology firms grow. So today, I am delighted to introduce the awesome Robyn Duda. Robyn is a growth strategist, and her superpower is in event marketing and creating experiences. She's an advisor to HIMSS and has her own firm, RDC, that specializes in experience marketing, especially in B2B. Now, I'm not really doing what you do justice. Could you just tell us a little bit about yourself? And I'm really interested in hearing about how it is that you're designing the future of what experience is and how that helps companies grow. Tell us your story.
So the long story short, I'll try and make it because I could go on forever. Great to be here, by the way. I fell in love with connecting people at a really early age, like as a child. I remember throwing like awesome birthday parties and like starting my own clubs because there were ways to really get people to get together. So once I was able to choose what I got to do and get paid for it, I tried to seek that out. And I've been in the industry for 16 years in events. And 10 of them I spent in tech. Various forms of tech, from healthcare to fintech to enterprise tech, mostly on the B2B side. And they were a lot of conferences, smaller events, road shows that were basically a big brand would come to us, and it was very agency-like, where I would create experiences that would drive the type of audience that they were looking to achieve in the room. Moved into the trade show side of the house years later, where I thought, oh man, this is going to be so boring to do one event a year. I remember one year, I think I clocked in at like 186 events in 1 year that we were managing. It was a lot.
For a week.
I remember doing 5 in 1 week, and I was in 5 physical cities across the country, different cities in 1 week. It was a breakfast, a lunch, flew to another event, and then the next day flew to the next 2 cities, and it was a breakfast, lunch in separate cities. Yeah, it was a lot, but I got to do really cool stuff like launch IBM's Watson all over the world, and it taught me a lot, because basically back then not to date my early 2000s. Event marketing and marketing in general was made up of generalists. So I had to know a little bit about a lot of stuff, which prepped me for moving into more niche roles throughout my career. And then eventually saying, when I moved into trade shows and started to really do strategy work, like how do we grow in 3 years? I started doing it in a very design-centric, you have to know your audience way. And it's about people of what we do. It's not about a sponsorship. It's not about a margin. It's not about what we can sell. That's the end result that we're looking for. But in order to design, we have to know who we're designing for on an intimate level. And I didn't know at the time that was design thinking. It was super cool when I figured that out. And I eventually left to start my own firm doing this for, I wanted to work with good people that wanted to do good things to move the world forward, but also who wanted to do kick-ass events, So I've been blessed enough to be able to do that for the last 4 years. And of course, most recently have been working with HIMSS. So that's the short story long. I could go on forever, but I get the awesome job of connecting people in ways that hopefully create moments that matter, and we turn events into experiences.
I love the notion of just, being user-centric, customer centric, sort of attendee centric, I guess.
When you think about this job, I mean, no one understood, like, the emails aren't working. Well, I think it's one of the hardest transactions. You have to get someone not only to go through your journey to buy a ticket, or at least do the registration process, that makes them then have to get off their butts and go somewhere. And a lot of times it's to leave their families, to fly, to go do things for several days, sometimes at a time. And that's a big ask of someone's life. So like you have to provide value. And to me, that value really has to sit with what problem are you going to solve for people?
Yeah, absolutely. Because you're right. You've got to motivate people, just as our clients have got to motivate people to buy a new technology. You've got to motivate people to show up to an event, right?
Yeah, I think we take that for granted, how hard that kind of transaction is. It isn't just somebody else just click to buy, ship it. It's a little bit different.
So, I mean, let's face it. This has been an extraordinarily tough 18 months. How's the industry adapting? And then how do you advise clients? What do you advise them to do?
Yeah. I mean, the industry, I say it, although a little reluctantly, I think that disruption is good for this industry right now. I think a lot of, I'm not saying COVID was good by any means for anyone, but I think the industry was ripe for disruption for a very long time. I think innovation was at a minimum across the board, both in and out of healthcare. It doesn't matter what industry you were at. The design and innovation didn't have to move forward because there wasn't an alternative and there wasn't a need to have to change. And COVID, certainly, of course, we've heard and seen the millions of virtual events that have come into play, and now hybrid, which I kind of hate that word. It's something that somebody made up.
Just explain what that means, because I think it means different things to different people.
It does. In my opinion, it is when you're bringing both a physical and a virtual environment together under one roof at the same time. I don't think that means that you're live broadcasting the event in its totality to a virtual audience. I think that they need to be, and what I advise my clients on, that they are separate experiences, complementary to each other. And that's I think the difference, that someone can go to the live event and still get something out of that digital event that you're putting together. And this hybrid, but there are hybrid moments that you can interact. You can see what's happening on site. You can take advantage of some of the things that happen at the live event, but that they feel like they're not watching a snow globe happen without them in it. They are actually living a different experience that's tailored to what their limitations and also what the benefits are of that medium. So what I really advise is, like, break everything you do down and build it back up in a place that is the most easily and best consumable. It doesn't matter if it's a physical event, if it's a virtual event, or if it's a hybrid experience. How do you get across? How do you solve someone's problem the best way possible that gets them from point A to point B with you?
HIMSS 2021. I'm a little confused. Was that a hybrid event, or was that two separate events?
So they did a digital experience. I think, again, hybrid is just a word someone in a boardroom made up to say we have a solution to COVID.
Right.
Live streaming of events has been happening. I did one of the first ones back in 2007. Cool. So this is not a new technology. This is not a new thing. People just packaged it and called it something different to make people feel really comfortable that they were changing. But honestly, it's nothing new. Mm-hmm. So what HIMSS put together was a digital experience that complemented the live event that was going on at Global Conference in Vegas. So there were moments that crossed over, that someone who was maybe in another country who couldn't make it because of a travel ban or for whatever reason, they were able to see parts of some of the major moments that were happening, like the future of healthcare, on site at the live event. However, there were moments that were tailored to them where they could have break-off discussions and they could do different things that didn't make them feel like they were really missing out, but weren't experiencing the same thing in a different way. There was a unique experience around it for them. And there were their own sessions that happened online as well that didn't happen at the live event. So there's something that if you wanted beyond that, you actually were at the live event, you can go and see that over the course of the next 45 days.
So what's going to happen over the next 18 months? I mean, I know it's almost an impossible question given we don't know what's going to happen.
What I get paid to do is to figure out what's happening in 18 months, but in the next 5 years. I mean, what I focus on is trying to look at macro and micro trends, both in the world and in specific industries. And what does that mean to the live event space? And I think the next 18 months, travel is going to be really difficult. I don't think travel budgets are going to come back the way that we hope that they would, which means that creating what I call an integrated experience model is even more important. It is making sure that there are moments for everyone, both in the physical sense and in a digital sense. So I think continuing that journey, but instead of just haphazardly throwing up as much, let's just do this and make it virtual, like we did I think a lot of folks did over the course of 2020 and parts of 2021. I think they have to be very meaningful moments moving forward because there is so much out there and everyone needs to differentiate themselves because time is super limited. And I think information is accessible with the internet. This isn't a new age that we're in right now. So you have to be saying something new and unique. You have to have different speakers. And what I always say is when we're talking about content, you need to make sure it's both unique and valuable. I can't find this anywhere else, and it actually is relevant to me. And when you hit that sweet spot, which not everyone does, they use the same content that they see in lots of different places, which doesn't make it unique. They can get that anywhere. But if it's also valuable to them, I think that's when you start to have a winner. And that's where I think people need to focus over the next 18 months. But it's going to be a mixed model. I don't think that's ever going away. I think that we've seen lots of great content on our Zooms and on our screens that we don't have to necessarily travel for. I think there is a purpose for live events, but I think that we need to make sure that we're understanding what our audiences really want right now.
Who do you think is doing it well, particularly, given maybe in healthcare? I mean, is there anybody that stands out as doing it well?
I think the last 18 months of COVID, everyone's been figuring it out. I mean, I have to say, I think that HIMSS did. I mean, this isn't a plug for HIMSS.
Good.
Part of what I did was really kind of help design what this model, this, not just the live event, but like what happens before, during, after. It's not just a post, pre, during, and post. It's how do you talk to your audience all year round and create stuff that gets them, I call it no dead ends content. It gets them to consume one thing and they understand I'm on a journey that's going to get me to the next piece of content that is relevant to me. Yeah. I don't know technically in healthcare who else has done it, but there's some folks that I'm excited to see who's doing it well, because live events are just starting to come back this fall. So, I think I'm excited to see some outside of the industry, see how they execute some things. Like Money 2020 is one that I know has done a lot of work behind the scenes over the last 18 months to work on truly understanding their audiences and come up with experiences around that. So I'm kind of excited to see how people execute the next 6 months, honestly.
I mean, so that's helpful in understanding kind of like how the conference or the conference industry is adapting. How about, what advice should people listening to this? A lot of them are technology companies marketing to healthcare. So their audience, their attendees, the attendees that they're interested in work for healthcare organizations. And you know what? Historically, having been in that position, it's that, once or twice a year where you get to see quite a few of your customers in one place, some of the prospects you're dealing with, and even meet some new prospects. And it's that sort of getting the salespeople in front of people is one of the main things. And what you do with the booth is important, but honestly, it's about that interaction. It's how do we compensate for that? How do we adjust?
I call it anatomy of experience. And I think it pertains both to folks who are organizing and for brands. I think brands are sitting on massive amounts of data right now from the last 18 months. Everything has been virtual you have every click. You should have everything they pressed when they come to virtual events that you have, or if you're sponsoring certain organizations, that information is accessible to you. So I think making sure that you're really looking at the data on who's interacting and what types of content you're putting out there, from an email to a virtual event to anything, who's engaging, how are they engaging, are they the right person? And this is a bold-ish statement, but I mean, we lived in a world where it was like, fill the funnel, it's a numbers game, more leads equal more sales. And I think that there's just so much, I am inundated with emails. I am inundated with event invitations. I think, especially with virtual, folks were able to pop as much, in an instant, you could create and spin up a virtual event. I think making sure that it is both a relevant moment for them, whether that email means something to them, you understand where they're at in their journey, where they're at, in the life cycle of potentially being a client of yours and or being a client of yours, and speaking to them as an individual instead of as another number. We've been talking about this in marketing for a really long time, but I'm not sure a lot of people are really living it super well, especially on the event front. It was just fill the lead, scan the badge, throw them in, send them an email. We'll see, there's a number, so many people are going to drop out. And I just think the more personalized and relevant you can make every interaction that you have with people right now as a brand, the more your brand is going to resonate with them. There are, the folks who message me and remember the things that I said in a conversation where it is much more meaningful, and it raises my eyebrows. So I think that we have to do a really good job getting to know the people that we want to purchase with us.
So I can see how you translate that into digital experiences, right? So you can see how with a buyer journey, how you can, with virtual tools, sort of, map to the buyer journey and have experiences that engage them. But, one thing going to HIMSS last week, in fact, it's the first time I'd traveled in 18 months. Certainly the first time I'd been to an event like that in actually 2 years. It just brought home, it's like, hey, there just is no substitute for having a face-to-face meeting with someone. Somebody you talked to, had Zoom, like 70 Zoom calls with, sitting down, you get much more done. How do these guys, the health tech, the marketers here, sort of manage through this? I mean, because can you do kind of networking in a virtual way that works anywhere near as well as it does in real life?
No, there are tons of technologies that do this, and I think it is a very difficult thing to replicate. When we talk about everyone's end goal is engagement, right? No matter what you're doing, from a brand standpoint, you want to engage. You want that moment of engagement, where a moment of connection that leads to engagement, of where a customer is just like, yep, I want to date you. Yep, let's move to the next stage. Yep, I want a proposal. Like whatever that moment is where they start to engage. And I think the expectation of the outcome and what success looks like in a virtual, a physical, and or a hybrid world are all very different. And I think the expectation on a virtual world of that you think you're going to date somebody right after they sign on to your virtual event is a really unrealistic expectation of the person on the other end. And that you can't replace a handshake or an elbow bump or whatever we're doing now these days. But there is an element of that it's very, very difficult to replicate. And I haven't seen it done super well yet.
No, I agree. Okay. Yeah, I agree with you.
That means that's what live events should be. It's about connecting people that you get them to engage. And I think there are other things that you can do in a virtual world that can lead to that being easier when you get on site and kind of warm you up. But I don't know if that it's completely replaceable.
No, I think we just might have to accept that's the way it's going to be. I mean, I tell you, as you were talking, what sort of the penny dropped for me, in that, in business to consumer, financial services or, packaged goods, Coke, I know you worked with Coke for a while. They create experiences which are about engagement and about entertainment and about making you feel the brand. And that then creates, in the B2C space, what's called activation, right? Which is, get you signed up for a bank account or get you to try a new product if it's a consumer packaged good or whatever it happens to be, new soft drink. Whereas I think in the B2B space, and frankly, especially in the space that we're in, it's actually not that. It's about meeting. It's about sort of, it's kind of it's old school, it works. And I think what's happening is that, I saw this last week, is that there were a number of major marketers that would have had huge booths who didn't have a booth, and then had one of the cabins in the back, had one of the 40-foot containers, the sort of with the windowless rooms, and just use it as a place to have meetings. And I think that it's sort of interesting. I sort of wonder whether we're going to move to a model where the exhibits, both in physical and digital, is going to be about being more experiential, which I think is what you're describing, but then figuring out a way to have in person as well going on in parallel with that.
Yeah, I totally think that that's where we're headed in the next 5 to 10 years, is probably even 3 sooner than that, is, discovery doesn't need to be, a real estate, like walking around a space play like a mall. Yeah. Discovery can happen lots of times during the year. It can happen all year long if you want. It's I use the dating analogy. It's like, how do you connect and how do you realize you have something that I need? What's the connection? What's the common point of interest between the two of us? And I think that can happen live or physical and virtual. I think that those things can happen, but the engagement has to come, like when you're like, yeah, I want to date you. Let's take it to the next step. Right. I want to talk more in depth. And I think that has to happen through getting to know someone, their business, what their problems really are, and how do I solve them? And I think that's where that kind of magic, I think the expectations are different. I just think that's really difficult virtually. I think that, again, there are tons of ways that you can create connection on a virtual platform. You click the button, talk to a salesperson, et cetera. But I think, I don't think that completely replaces how we get to engagement in a physical setting.
So you said 5 years. What does this all look like 5 years? What does HIMSS 2027 look like?
I'm looking 5-10 years. I mean, right. I started to
HIMSS 2030.
I'm really
2030. I was going to say 2130. Yeah, 2030. Yeah.
I'm just starting to have the conversations about, like, people talk about the future, and they're really talking about right now. Like, what's the real future? And I think it's, the future is personalized experiences, much like personalized health is coming up. And I think that is the key. Everything right now is very personalized experiences to us. Netflix, Amazon, et cetera. They make it feel like they know who we are because of data. So I think we need to, as an industry, really move and really look at data as much as possible. That is going to move us forward really fast. And I think it's probably going to be somehow, I really am interested to see where the metaverse plays into all of this. And starting to have some conversations with folks around what that looks like and how are those moments in this separate world? What do they look like, and how can we create engagement in those environments? And that is really interesting to me to see where we can go.
The notion of creating personalized experiences is such an interesting idea. It's like, because I think that it used to drive me crazy. It was like you'd spend all this money on booths, and everybody would say, well, you've got to have your little tchotchkes, right? You've got to have your stress balls or your candy or whatever. And it says, why? It was because there are people who show up at the shows. First thing they do is they go to whichever booth is going to give them a tote bag. And then they go from booth to booth, just taking tchotchkes and candy. It's sort of like it's like an adult trick or treat. You think, these people are never going to buy anything from me. And they're not the type of nice people, all that sort of thing, but they're not the people in the organization that are buying. So it's almost like what you want to get to is where, rather than, and this is kind of interesting from last week, is that there were fewer people, but everybody I spoke to said, yeah, you know what, I had fewer meetings, but they were really good meetings.
Exactly.
And I think that's what it gets to, is it gets to a thing where actually what we're going to do is say, I'm personally inviting you to attend a session with us, and this is what we're going to do. It's almost like setting up a demo and personalized experience, but you're only going to do this for 30 people a day, not have 300 people coming through and taking 300 stress balls off you.
Well, and it's the matter of having a huge menu, like a Cheesecake Factory, of things to pick from. and being overwhelmed. There's the paradox of choice. I mean, we only, you actually shut down after 7 choices or 9 choices. I can't remember exactly what it is. It's terrible. I should I quote it all the time.
More than 7. So we don't remember.
I think it's 7. Yeah, I thought it was 7. This cheesecake menu of stuff for you to go to that you just like, I don't know where I'm supposed to be when. Yeah. To, okay, this is the purpose. This is the problem that I'm coming with. These are the problems I need to solve. Yep. How do you help me solve them? And who are all the players along the way that can actually do that with me? If you can set up a journey like that, man, there's a reason for being there, you know?
Yeah. And I think it goes back to where you started, which is it's all about creating experiences that are meaningful for the people that you're inviting. And they've got to be meaningful enough that they're going to want to actually travel because, you know, regardless of what, hopefully all COVID goes away whenever it goes away, or becomes less of an issue. But still, people are going to say, yeah, maybe I'm not going to travel. Maybe I'm not going to go to HIMSS. I'll just do it virtually. But if there's a reason, which is, you know what, I do want to actually meet with these guys and talk about this issue because this sounds really interesting. And it's more interesting than watching a webinar. Then I'll get on a plane.
And I think that's where brands really need to step up. So we're kind of talking that. I think they need to, rather than just doing the stuff that they always did, make the big booth and pass out the tchotchkes. What is it? What's the problem that you're solving for the industry, and how are you part of the solution? Not just I'm one of a solution. I've built it. Come find me. Yep. How do you present yourself in a way that solves people's problems? And I think that's part of what's missing a lot of the time. So I think that, brands need to work really hard on where their dollars go and how they best resonate their message to folks.
So I've got a closing question for you, Robyn, which is, if you could give the audience one piece of advice, so maybe some practical advice, that's something that you wish somebody told you yourself at an earlier stage in your career, what would that one piece of advice be?
Oh, from a career standpoint or from an event standpoint? I guess I could do both.
Both, but do one of each. Here you go.
From an event standpoint, I think we're sitting on, if there's one thing that you take away from this conversation is data is your key to future strategy. You have to have a strategy. Most folks on all sides, whether you're an organizer or a brand, they go from event to event to event to event. It's a show cycle mentality, and you just keep moving on and you churn until you have to be on the defensive. And I think data could make everyone be on the offensive right now. So if there's one thing people do, find and dig through as much data as possible, so that you're spending in the right ways, and it's not a waste of people's time and money. Life-wise, my best piece of advice that I was given was figure out what it is you love to do and find someone to pay you to do it. And here I am.
There you go. That's great. Yeah. Actually, that's why I went into advertising when I first got out of school.
Yeah.
Then I grew up. I still kind of sort of do it, but not the madman type stuff. Well, Robyn, this has been just a great conversation. I knew when we first connected that this would be jam-packed full of insights, and you've got my brain whirring. Just before we go, I just want to let everyone listening to this that you can subscribe to this podcast on Apple or Spotify and all the other podcast channels. And you can view the video. If you're not watching the video and you're listening to this on a podcast, you can actually view the video through the link in the show notes below on HIMSS TV. Got lots more guests coming up. And so I want to thank everybody for listening and viewing. And if you have a topic you'd like us to cover or somebody you think we should be interviewing, email me. Email me at adam@healthlaunchpad.com. That's adam@healthlaunchpad.com, or just find me on LinkedIn, Adam Chirinas. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Robyn, and have a great rest of the day.